All right, so today we're diving deep into a story that's, well, honestly, it's got a bit of everything. Myth, power, charisma.
A whole lot of charisma.
Yeah, and I mean, we're talking about Khan, right?
Yeah.
And he's like this figure that kind of walks this line between, classic vampire lore and the legend that's unfolding in like real time.
And what's so captivating about Khan's story is that it's not just the fangs and bloodlust, you know? The sources we're looking at, they reveal this whole narrative that delves into like identity and legacy and even the very human struggle for power.
Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. I'm seeing in these sources that Khan's journey is anything but typical. He starts as this chaotic, almost feral vampire, and then he like totally evolves into this figure who inspires this like crazy devotion.
Yeah, like a complete 180.
Exactly. So how does that even happen?
Well, a lot of that transformation, you can really attribute it to his mentor, this figure we know as Boss Hogg. But before we get into their relationship, let's rewind a bit to Khan's early years.
Yeah, the sources paint a pretty vivid picture of those early days. We're talking indiscriminate feeding, a trail of victims.
He wasn't pretty.
No, not at all. Doesn't really scream refined future leader. So what was driving all this chaos?
Well, you got to remember, Khan's early years were fueled by this raw, untamed hunger. So imagine a being coming into their powers, not really understanding the full scope of what they can do or the consequences of their actions.
Right. So it was all instinct.
Pure instinct, yeah. A primal need for sustenance was driving every single move he made.
And that kind of reckless feeding frenzy, that obviously attracts attention, right?
Yeah.
The sources mention something about putting his entire kind at risk.
Exactly. Uncontrolled feeding, especially on that kind of scale, it can expose the existence of vampires to the human world.
And that's a big no-no.
A huge no-no. Most vampires go to, like, extreme lengths to avoid that. It's about survival,
Yeah.
Maintaining secrecy.
So it's not just about Khan's personal journey then. His actions have implications for this entire community. It adds a whole other layer of complexity, right?
Oh, absolutely. And that's where Boss Hogg steps onto the scene. He recognizes the danger Khan poses, not just to himself, but to the whole vampire world.
But he doesn't, like, try to stop him or anything?
Well, instead of condemning him, Boss Hogg sees potential, this raw power that could be, honed and directed.
This Boss Hogg sounds like a fascinating character. The sources are kind of sparse on his background, but it's clear he plays a huge role in Khan's story.
Think of Boss Hogg as a strategist, a master manipulator who really understands the subtleties of power. He sees in Khan this force that can be shaped, an instrument that, with the right guidance, can achieve, like, extraordinary things.
So he kind of takes Khan under his wing, so to speak.
Ah,
What was his approach, though? Did he try to suppress Khan's urges? Teach him, like, restraint or something?
it's a little more nuanced than that. Boss Hogg recognized that true power doesn't come from brute force, but from influence, from seduction.
So instead of just taking what he wanted, Khan learned to make mortals willing participants.
Precisely. Boss Hogg teaches Khan the art of persuasion, of crafting this image that inspires admiration, even worship. He helps Khan refine his speech, his mannerisms, his whole persona to exude this, like, irresistible charm.
So it's like building a brand,
Yeah,
creating a persona that draws people in.
you got it. And this carefully cultivated image was amplified by Khan's unique ability. He could walk in daylight.
Wait, hold on. A day-walking vampire. Now that's a game changer. I thought they were all confined to the night.
Right, that's the usual story. Traditional vampire lore says they're vulnerable to sunlight, but Khan breaks that rule.
So he's already this powerful, charismatic figure, and then on top of that, he can walk in the daylight. No wonder people were drawn to him.
Right. It sets him apart. It adds this whole element of mystique. It blurs the lines between myth and reality.
So people are drawn to him, intrigued by his power and the mystery surrounding him. But how does all this translate into control and influence?
Okay, so think about it. A vampire who walks in daylight can move freely in the human world, building connections, amassing influence in ways other vampires could only dream of.
Right, it's like a huge strategic advantage.
Absolutely. And Khan, under Boss Hogg's guidance, learns to exploit it masterfully.
And this is where it gets really interesting, right? The sources suggest that this daywalking, combined with his carefully cultivated image, allowed Khan to build a network of like devoted followers.
Exactly. Mortals, captivated by his charisma and the allure of the forbidden, they willingly entered his world, became part of this intricate web of power he was weaving. They offered themselves not out of fear, but out of adoration. They became a source of sustenance, protection, even information.
Okay, so we've got this network of devoted followers, right? Totally drawn to Khan's charisma and his power. But there's this one detail in the sources that I found super interesting. It's Khan's preference for European blood.
Yeah, this is where Khan's story gets really complex. His blood preference isn't just like a matter of taste, it's tied to his heritage, his European vampire lineage from his sire, and his own African ancestry.
So it's like this pull in two different directions.
Exactly. On one hand, you've got this primal, almost instinctual drive tied to his vampire lineage, but then you have this whole other layer connected to his identity, his sense of self.
Right, so how does that all play out?
Well, Khan's preference for European blood, particularly from women with blonde hair and blue eyes, it speaks to this deep yearning to connect with his European vampire ancestors. The sources describe it as this pull towards the source of his power, almost like he's trying to reclaim a lineage that was stolen from him.
It's like he's piecing together this puzzle, trying to figure out his place in the world by exploring the roots of his vampiric nature.
Yeah.
But it also brings up questions about power dynamics, doesn't it?
For sure.
I mean, is this a form of rebellion against the historical oppression of his African ancestors?
That's definitely a valid interpretation. By choosing to feed on those who historically held power over his people, Khan is kind of reversing the flow of energy. It's symbolic, reclaiming agency and challenging centuries of subjugation.
But it's definitely a complicated issue, especially when you consider consent. These women are drawn to Khan, they willingly offer themselves to him, but is it really a level playing field?
Right, that's the heart of it. Consent does complicate the narrative, but it doesn't change the fact that Khan holds immense power. The sources describe these women as, enthralled by him. Their devotion borders on worship. It begs a question, can true consent exist when one person has that much sway over another?
It's a tough one for sure.
Yeah.
It's like that question, can you separate the art from the artist? Can we admire Khan's dedication to empowering his people, his vision for their future, without condoning the way he goes about it?
Yeah, these are questions every listener has to grapple with on their own. Khan's story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about power, about desire, about the complexities of human relationships.
And it's not just about the act of feeding, right? The sources make it clear that Khan cultivates a very specific lifestyle, surrounding himself with all these symbols of his European heritage.
White beaches, these lavish gatherings, a whole world that reflects his aesthetic preferences.
So it's almost like he's creating this echo chamber.
Yeah, his environment becomes an extension of his identity. It reinforces his choices, creating this self-perpetuating cycle. It's like he's immersing himself in a world that aligns with his vampiric nature, solidifying his connection to that lineage.
So it goes way deeper than just blood. It's about creating a whole world that reflects his desires and reinforces his sense of self.
Exactly. And within this world, Khan sets his sights on something much bigger than just personal gratification. He envisions a future where the Black Diamonds, the community he's committed to protecting and empowering, they rise to a position of global dominance.
Right. The Black Diamonds, we touched on them earlier, but I want to dig a little deeper. Who are they exactly? And what's his vision for their future?
The Black Diamonds, they represent resilience, strength, this shared legacy of overcoming adversity. They're a community that's been through the fire, and Khan sees their potential for greatness.
The sources mention a specific group within the Black Diamonds called the VVS. Very, very special. What makes them so special? And what's their role in Khan's grand plan?
The VVS, they're the elite. The chosen few who show exceptional talent and potential. Khan personally mentors them, grooming them for leadership roles within the community and even beyond. Think financial wizards, political strategists, cultural icons. They're being trained to be the architects of the Black Diamond's rise to power.
So it's not just about protection or handouts. It's about giving them the tools to control their own destiny.
Exactly. Khan gets it. True empowerment comes from self-sufficiency, from being able to shape the world on your own terms. He's building a legacy not just for himself, but for generations to come.
And that's where his son, Adonis, comes in, right? Adding another layer of complexity to Khan's motivations.
Oh, absolutely. Adonis represents Khan's link to humanity, a reminder of the world he left behind when he became a vampire. But he's also a symbol of the future Khan's striving for.
So it's like he's trying to create a world where his son and all future generations of Black Diamonds inherit a legacy of strength, prosperity, and influence.
And that legacy is tied to his vision of a global banking empire controlled by the Black Diamonds. Khan sees economic power as the key to true liberation, a way to level the playing field and ensure their dominance on a global scale.
So it's not just about revenge or righting the wrongs of the past. It's about building a future where the Black Diamonds hold the power, shaping the world according to their own vision. But the question remains, do the ends justify the means?
That's the big moral dilemma at the heart of Khan's story. He's complex, driven by noble aspirations and ruthless ambition. His methods are often questionable, his choices ethically ambiguous, but his ultimate goal is the empowerment of his people.
It's a story that really makes you think about power, about morality, about the lasting effects of oppression. And as we go deeper into Khan's world, we encounter even more thought-provoking themes and contradictions.
In the final part of our deep dive, we'll explore the ins and outs of Khan's relationship with Boss Hogg, the man who shaped him into the powerful figure he is today. We'll unpack the deal they struck, the exchange that bound them together and set Khan on this path to power.
All right, so we're back, and we've been talking about this captivating story of Khan, right? He's this figure who embodies, like, the allure and the danger of power all wrapped up in one. We've seen him transform from this chaotic force of nature into a leader who's driven by, this desire to elevate his people, the Black Diamonds.
And at the heart of that whole transformation is his relationship with his mentor, Boss Hogg.
Right from the start. It's pretty obvious that Boss Hogg is more than just a teacher. He's this strategist, a master manipulator who seems to be playing a much deeper game.
Well, what's really interesting about them is how their dynamic reflects Khan's own internal struggle. It's like instinct versus ambition. Boss Hogg sees the raw power in Khan, but he also sees how dangerous it could be if it's not controlled. He becomes this guiding force, like a voice of reason during all the chaos of Khan's early years.
Yeah, and the sources describe this one specific exchange between them, a deal that really shapes Khan's entire life. It's almost like something out of like a Faustian tale or something.
Exactly. Boss Hogg goes to Khan with this proposition, right? He wants a theme song.
A theme song.
Yeah, an anthem that will basically immortalize his legacy. But in exchange, he offers Khan something way more valuable than just wealth or power. Knowledge.
Okay, so what does Khan ask for? What kind of knowledge could be worth more than all the riches in the world?
Khan's request is simple, but it's also really deep. He wants to know how to make mortals willingly offer themselves to him, how to use influence and inspire devotion. He basically wants to know the secrets of seduction, the art of bending people's will to his own.
Wow, so it's this turning point. Khan realizes that true power isn't about forcing people to submit. It's about inspiring them to do it willingly. He wants devoted followers who choose to be part of his world because they want to, not because they're afraid.
Exactly. And Boss Hogg, he sees Khan's potential and he gets the huge implications of what Khan's asking, so he agrees to the exchange. He becomes Khan's guide, his mentor, sharing all these secrets about persuasion and manipulation.
So both of them get something out of it. Boss Hogg gets his anthem, his legacy cemented through music.
Yep.
And Khan gets the knowledge he needs to build his empire, this network of followers, influence that reaches far beyond the shadows.
And this exchange is really the foundation for Khan's rise to power. He takes what Boss Hogg teaches him and starts cultivating his image, refining everything from the way he speaks to the way he moves. He wants to project this irresistible charm. And of course, he uses his daywalking ability to make himself even more mysterious and alluring.
So you've got this carefully crafted image, plus his genuine desire to help the Black Diamonds. And people are naturally drawn to him. They see him as a leader, even a savior, someone who embodies both power and compassion.
It's a powerful combination. His followers aren't just blindly following him. They believe in his vision. They see him as someone who can create a better future. They offer themselves willingly, and their devotion just fuels Khan's ambition, makes him even more determined.
But it feels like there's got to be a darker side to all of this, right? The sources hint at a cost, a price that Khan has to pay for all this power.
Yeah, Khan's methods definitely have consequences. The sources suggest that all this reliance on Boss Hogg's teachings, all this manipulation, it's taken a toll on him. He's become more distant, more calculating, and he's starting to lose the empathy that used to motivate him.
It's that classic story, isn't it? Ambition and the sacrifices you make to achieve it. Khan's rise to power has cost him a part of himself, a piece of his humanity.
And it's this internal struggle, this battle between wanting to do good and the methods he uses that makes Khan such a fascinating and ultimately tragic character.
So we've covered a lot in our deep dive into the legend of Khan. We've talked about his transformation, his journey to power, his complicated relationships, and all the ethical dilemmas he has to face. We've explored his preference for European blood and how it ties into his vampire heritage and his desire to reclaim a sense of power. We've discussed his vision for the Black Diamonds, his plan to create a global banking empire controlled by his people, and the question of whether the ends justify the means in his pursuit of that goal.
And as we wrap up, we're left with more questions than answers, right? Like, what happens when the line between savior and manipulator becomes blurry? Can a leader who builds his empire on carefully crafted images and seduction really deliver on his promises of empowerment? Khan's story is still being written, and the sources offer these tantalizing glimpses into his future, hinting at both triumphs and tragedies yet to come. The fate of the Black Diamonds, the legacy he's fighting for, it's all hanging in the balance.
It's a story that stays with you, it makes you think about power, about morality, and the long shadow of oppression. It's a story that challenges us to examine our own beliefs and grapple with these complex issues. And as we move forward, knowing that Khan's legend is still unfolding, it's up to each of us to ponder these questions and consider what his story means for us, for the world we live in, and for the future we're all shaping together.